They said, we don't want you on our staff because it would look bad if we hired a creationist. That's the type of persecution you get. Rod Levake was told, he told his students, I kind of doubt this Darwin theory is true. So they took him away from teaching biology and gave him another job. They said, we don't want you teaching biology because you might make our students doubt Darwin's theory. That's how it's protected. It's a religion. There's a teacher in Indiana, Dan Clark, his principal called him in, Ed Eller, or the superintendent, and said he could not introduce creation to his class. Now, there's no law against teaching creation at all. There are no court cases that says you can't teach creation. They just said you can't be mandatory. But teachers always have the right to teach creation. But here's the problem. The law says you can teach it, the court says you can teach it, but your boss now says you can't. So he quit his job finally over that. He stood firm and said, look, I'm not going to bow to this one. He quit his job. Dean Kenyon wrote the book Pandas and People. He was a science teacher at San Francisco State University. He wrote this book and says, it's a biology textbook, basically, a science textbook, that says, hey, you know, there must have been some kind of designer. This is so complicated, this is amazing. There must have been a designer. It doesn't try to get him saved or converted to be a Baptist or a Buddhist or a Catholic. It just says, look, there must be a designer. He was a tenured biology professor, San Francisco State University. He had written all kinds of books about evolution when he believed in it. Then he got converted and said, you know, I really doubt that theory is true. It doesn't work. And so they fired him. But he was tenured, so he sued them and got his job back, and they put him in as a lab assistant washing test tubes, stuff that, you know, the students do. He had to sue him again to get his real job back. Just because he said, I think there might be a creator to this universe. That's the type of persecution you get. When I spoke in Lubbock, Texas, several years ago, they had a professor there named Dr. Dini, D-I-N-I, who teaches biology. He told his students, if you don't believe in evolution, don't come ask me for a recommendation to go off to medical school, because I won't give you one. He said, it was on his website for years. He said, if you don't believe in evolution, you'll never get a recommendation from me. Well, when I went to speak there in Lubbock, Texas, the students offered Dr. Dini $1,000 if he would debate me for 2 hours, and he refused. $1,000 for 2 hours. That's pretty good money, Leah. How'd you like to make $1,000 for 2 hours? I mean, he said, no, he won't do it. The persecution that happens against Christians and against creationists in the secular school system is mind-boggling. What are they afraid of? So I say, well, it's not true that all scientists believe in creation, but many scientists that do believe in creation are afraid to say anything because they know the kind of persecution you're going to get. How many teachers were there in Ukraine that did not believe in communism but didn't dare say anything about it? You know, anybody, even if you don't even smile right at Stalin, he'd kill you. You know, you'd end up in the gulag someplace. That's the kind of things happen in America, believe it or not. If a person doesn't support the evolution theory vocally and actively, they'll be banished to academic Siberia. They lose their grant money, they will lose their job. You know, it's sad. And Patrick Henry College was told back in November of 2002, I believe, that they weren't going to get accreditation because they didn't teach enough evolution in their college. There's an article in Agape Press here. A university professor said she was asked to resign for introducing elite students to flaws in Darwinian thought at the Mississippi University for Women. I spoke just north of there a few weeks after this happened. I talked to some of the people involved. This lady was told she had to resign her job because she was her teaching might make students doubt Darwinism. What are they going to school for, an education or indoctrination? Yeah, you're going to get an education, I thought. And it used to be that way, but it's just not anymore. It's pretty sad. And this lady said that this professor that wanted to fire her hadn't even heard her speech. But she was, you know, raising doubts about Darwinism. All kinds of scientists down through history, I mean, like thousands of them, all the branches of science were started by creationists. There's a list, there's a good list on Answers in Genesis. Just go to answersingenesis.org website and type in scientists who believe creation. And it'll bring up all kinds of articles, and you can read about all these scientists down through history who have been creationists. Very famous scientists. I've often asked evolutionists, I say, guys, can you name me one advancement in modern science we've had because of the evolution theory? Is that why we have computers? Is that why we have, you know, telephones, radios? Is that why we went to the moon? What advancements can be named because of this evolution theory? They've never given an answer. There is nothing. The theory is useless. But all major science, all the whole branches of science in the last 400 years were started by creationists. Now, they weren't all young earth creationists like me, and they certainly weren't all independent, temperamental, fundamental, right-wing, radical Baptists like me. But they were, you know, creationists. Werner von Braun, the head of our space program, was a creationist. A. Wilder-Smith, William Ramsey. The Wright brothers, they studied birds. They said, we want to see how the designer, the creator, how God made the birds, and we'll learn how to make an airplane by studying airplanes. The guy who invented the MRI, magnetic resonance imaging machine, is a young earth creationist. There are creationists today. There are a couple good books we have in our library or for sale on our website. In 6 Days is one, and On the Seventh Day. This is 50 scientists who believe in creation. Here's 40 more scientists who believe in creation. You can get these. There are thousands of scientists who do believe in creation, do not believe in evolution. Karl Popper, a famous leading philosopher of science, he said, evolution is not a fact. Evolution doesn't even qualify as a theory or hypothesis. It's a metaphysical research program. It's not really testable science. Evolution is a religion. And they get so angry when I tell them that, which is probably why I tell them that, every few minutes, because I enjoy pushing the right buttons, Julian Huxley, his grandfather, Thomas Huxley, was the guy who really pushed Darwin when Darwin's book came out. Julian Huxley said, I suppose the reason we leapt at origin of species was the idea of God interfered with our sexual mores. We don't want God telling us what to do. That's why they've accepted evolution. Michael Ruse said, evolution is promoted by its practitioners as more than a mere science. Evolution is promulgated as an ideology, a secular religion, a full-fledged alternative to Christianity with meaning and morality. He said, I am an ardent evolutionist and an ex-Christian. But I must admit that in this one complaint, and Mr. Gish is one of many to make it, the literalists are right. Evolution is a religion. This was true of evolution in the beginning, and it's true of evolution still today. Evolution is a religion in every sense of the word. Evolution is a fairy tale for grown-ups. The theory has helped nothing in the progress of science. It's useless. So it's not true they all believe it. Nearly all branches of science were started by creationists. Evolution theories added nothing to science. When students or professors fear expressing their real honest thoughts, they're not getting educated, they're getting indoctrinated. Students get flunked for not supporting the evolution theory. Every week when I go out and speak, somebody will come to me and say, when I was in biology class, I wrote a paper and the teacher gave me an F because it didn't support evolution, or because I dared to go against the evolution theory. I get calls like that. Diane, you take some of the calls and transfer them over to me. Students saying, hey, what do I do? My teacher gave me an F because my paper went against evolution. It's sad. I mean, it's discrimination. All the advancements in modern technology have nothing to do with evolution. Evolution is a hindrance to science, not a help at all. Okay, next question. What about separation of church and state? Well, there's no such phrase in the Constitution. You can get the entire Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence for $1. This little book, Citizens Rule Book, excellent book. Everybody ought to read this one. It's got a great story in here about the jurors. It's amazing the power that jurors have. One juror can decide he doesn't like the law. And if they pass a law in your city that says, you can't spit on the sidewalk, and somebody spits on the sidewalk, and they videotape him, they got the whole thing. He broke the law. I mean, they take him to court. It's proven. He broke the law. But you as a juror say, I don't like that law. I don't think it's fair to say you can't spit on the sidewalk. The judge is going to threaten all the jurors and say, no, you have to rule according to the law. You got to listen to my instruction. You don't have to listen to anything that judge says. He's blowing smoke, okay? Smile, nod your head. When you get in that jury room, you vote not guilty. And the rest of the jurors are going to think you're nuts. What do you mean not guilty? You saw the tape. You saw it. Yes, I know. But the law's no good. Jury nullification. Powerful, powerful story here. Anyway, the Constitution does not mention separation of church and state. You should get the Federalist Papers. Those are all the papers that the Founding Fathers wrote as they were developing this Constitution. And you can see their thinking process. The same day they voted for the First Amendment, which people often say separation of church and state, which is not what it says. It says the government shall not make a religion or prohibit the free exercise thereof. But that same day, Congress voted to send $25,000 to help a Catholic missionary start a mission to help the Indians in St. Louis. They were not trying to separate church from state. They wanted to keep the state out of the church, but not keep the church out of the government. No phrase in the Constitution about separation of church and state, and it's perfectly fine for Christian teachers to do all kinds of Christian things in their school. My brother taught 34 years, public school, had a picture of Jesus right by his desk all 34 years. Many teachers keep a Bible right on their desk. Now, if they give you a hard time, the principal might say you can't do that. I'm not saying you won't get persecution. But as far as legally, you can. There's lc.org, libertycouncil.org, Matt Staver's organization. He handles cases like that. David Gibbs, they do stuff like that. David Gibbs, it's his organization in Orlando, Florida. So yes, if you have trouble, see one of those folks. But what happened, Thomas Jefferson wrote a letter to some Baptist pastors, and he's the one that mentioned the phrase in the letter, separation of church and state. And now the atheists are using that to say, oh, you can't have Christian things in government. What a dumb idea. Our country was founded to be a Christian country. They all said that. Go to wallbuilders.com, David Barton's great website. He's got lots of stuff on. There's no such thing as separation of church and state. So don't fall for that. And we can cover more on that in our college class. Here's what's happened, though. The Constitution to the United States, Article 1, Section 10, says you have the right to make a contract. Let's suppose Adam says, Brother Hovind, I'm going to pay you $10 an hour the rest of my life. Okay, and he signs a contract. And then he does not fulfill the contract. Well, then I can sue him. And he could say, I've got a constitutional right to keep my money. Yes, you do. But you also have a constitutional right to make a contract. And you made a contract. So the judge is just going to uphold contract law. Now, what churches do is they sign a contract and don't even know they're signing it. They sign up to become 501c3. As soon as you become 501c3, you are now a corporation. You are not a church. See, God creates people, and God established the church. People created government, and government creates corporations. So a church that becomes 501c3 has stepped way down from where God intended them to be, and they have now become a creature of the state. If you read Internal Revenue Code, which is where 501c3 comes from, turn over a few pages to 508. Internal Revenue Code 508, Section C1A, says churches are mandatory exceptions. Not an exemption, they're an exception. The government recognizes churches do not have to get 501c3 status. But if they do, they have just put a noose around their neck, said, here, hang me whenever you'd like. They can't talk about politics. You can read 501c3. They can't get involved in political campaigns. So separation of church and state, I would say, well, if you're a 501c3, probably correct. If you're a real church ministry, no problem. Okay, a question that I very frequently get asked, I would say every single week I go speak, which is 52 weeks a year now for 16 years. Every single week somebody will say, now Hovind, how do we see stars billions of light years away? You say the earth is only 6,000 years old. How do we see the stars? Yesterday on the radio program, on the website, Dr. Dino, some guy called in and said, now, Hovind, I did some studies, and in a 6,000 light year radius, we'd only have so many cubic miles, and all the stars wouldn't fit. I said, wait. Who said anything about a 6,000 mile radius? He said, well, you're the one that said the universe is only 6,000 years old. Yes, I did. But I did not say all the stars are within a 6,000 light year radius. I've never said that. That would be ludicrous. But how do we see the stars billions of light years away if the universe is only 6,000 years old? And I believe the Bible clearly teaches it's only 6,000 years old. And God made everything. Actually, He made the earth first in Genesis 1. And then verse 14, He made the stars also. Evolution says He made the stars evolve first and then the earth. Well, there's certainly a lot of stars out there. Nehemiah chapter 9 says, Thou, even Thou art Lord alone. Thou hast made the heaven of heavens. God is claiming that He made them. So, either He did or He didn't. But what about the stars? How do they fit in? Astronomers kind of see a star blow up about every 30 years. It's not like it's on a timetable. It might be every 5 years.